Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first episode of The Power of Eight. I am Jennifer Smith, and I'm here with Pollyanna Blanco. Hello, Pollyanna. How are you?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here with you, Jennifer. It's an honor and a blessing.
Very good, very good. So, our first episode here, we are going to just walk you through a little bit about what we're going to be doing over the next several weeks. And we are going to be utilizing this book here called The Power of Eight, which was written by Lynne McTaggart. And Pollyanna and I will be going through this chapter by chapter and discussing our experiences based on the book, what the book has to say, and if we have experiences that validate some of the scientific research that Lynn has put together with her worldwide studies. So the first thing we're going to go through is the prologue, and a little bit about the studies here is that she was an investigative reporter, Lynn was, and she was trying to validate how spiritual healings work through a scientific approach. How could she validate this scientifically? And so that's a little bit about the book, but as we get more into it, there's so many interesting things that come about and so many learnings that we thought this would be a great share for everyone. And then you can also purchase the book on your own if you want to follow along with us. So her research was over thousands of people in over 100 countries, where she did these global researches about spiritual healings and the power of intention, the power of our mindset, the power of our thoughts, and the miraculous healings that were occurring. There was many things that happened over this time, and I think there was a few things that she said that really stuck out to me. And she said that there was the kind of miracles that were happening that would defy every last belief we hold about the way we're told the world is supposed to work. And I thought that was really interesting. So, Pollyanna, do you have anything to add about sort of the setup of the experiments before we get into all the other discussions we're going to have?
Well, I found it really fascinating. I dog-eared and underlined things in the book too, and I've actually got my Archangel Uriel card, success through action that I reach for as a bookmark.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, I mean, there's so much even in the prologue, right? We were talking about that, like, oh my goodness, we'll pick out a couple of things that grabbed our attention. And one of the things that I really like is, and I feel is so important these days, because there's so much going on in the world that can be, you know, polarizing and, separate, cause a lot of sense of separateness or aloneness, is this unified field. And there's a part where she talks about that the scientist that she had been working with, and um, this whole point about the evidence that all of reality may be connected through the 0 point field and underlying quantum energy field and vast network of energy exchange. And like, that's something that I think is a really important part of the setup for her experiments, is this premise that everything is interconnected. So I really, really like that aspect of her work, that it's operating from this really broad, vast perspective of, world, of how we see ourselves in the world. So it dovetails beautifully with what you just shared, Jennifer, about everything, about the, how it's going to completely undo and unpin how we have been taught to see the world.
Yeah, and I like that you pointed out the 0 point field, because we have studied about that and experienced it from more of a spiritual standpoint, but she's coming from a scientific standpoint. So, what I love about this book is that people are trying to understand and they want to connect through a science standpoint or try to connect it intellectually on how spiritual healings work. There's a lot of good information in here that can help people do that. I think because if you're an energy healer, because I teach Reiki, so I teach people how to do the energy healing. It's also a wonderful book for that as well, because now you can take it to the next level and do more of collective healing with what it's titled as the power of eight, whenever you have the group intention healing as well. Because I know a lot of people learn self healing or energy healing just to work for themselves and don't really go out and make that part of their service to the world. It might be just with a few friends and family. But now this opens up the opportunity, another idea where you can get with other people and really service the world in a bigger way if that's what you choose to do. So I feel like it covers all bases, no matter where people are right now, what their belief systems are. There's something in here for everyone.
Yes, that's what struck me in her book too, Jennifer, is that it was very open in that sense. That you didn't have to subscribe to a specific belief system or spirituality or religion, and the point you just emphasized there a moment ago about um, doing the energy healing, because like yourself, I've studied Reiki. I'm a Reiki master, and we've both got lots of different modalities that we, use in our practices that are related to energy healing. And yet, it's either working with one on one or with a few people. What I think is so powerful to remember is that um, even every day when we're moving through our lives in a less formal way, because she has another quote that jumped out for me too is. Our thoughts may not be locked inside our heads, right? So it's the idea of what are we thinking when we're, moving through our day. And the fact that she even goes on to say that thoughts are not just things, or where is it? Yeah. Thoughts weren't just things or even things that affect other things. Thoughts might even have the capacity to fix whatever was broken in a human life. I prefer to say what, which returns us to wholeness rather than broken, because I don't really believe anything's broken. However, I like the point about this idea that we are, when we're moving through our lives, we can be the healing light in our presence. And then, you know, we can, these power of eight groups is a great way to practice that, to really make that effort to gather with people. And her book talks about how healing that is, not only for the person receiving the healing, um, but for all of the people who are also sending the healing.
Yeah. We talk a lot about manifesting and how important our thoughts are, our thought energy that can penetrate all through the cosmos. That's how powerful our thought energy is. And thoughts are things, and they do become um, we can take the formless with our thoughts and bring it into the formed reality. And I think that's what she was discovering through this and trying to, in what she stumbled across through her many experiments, is that thoughts do have the capacity to change physical matter. And what I think she so beautifully set out to do was to show that, you know, that this can happen from a healing standpoint too, not just from, um, manifesting things, material things and diamonds, which is all possible as well. But how can we heal? How can we heal ourselves, other people, in the world? And that was one of the things she was her big goal here was to prove that out.
Yes, because I love how she goes in later on in the book into all of the different, peace initiatives in the world, the bridging of different cultures and religions through these intention gatherings, that going back to that whole premise of the unified field, and also just like that awareness that when we're, thinking about law of attraction and, and in the past, a lot of people have been focused on, what can I get, as a result of channeling my thoughts or, directing my thought energy. And this goes much deeper than that. It goes into, our heart, our spirit, our soul, our body mind, right? W- and really at the heart of it, is this awareness that we are so much more than we think we are, right? We the power of 8 is, because she at first talked about doing it with millions of people and then wondered if it would be just as effective with 8 people. And so I almost sort of see it as like this, I don't know, this popped into my mind right now, but you have, we always think we have this, like, I think paradigm for a lot of us that we're kind of conditioned with, that more is better, right? So if we have all these people, doing an intention spirit, it'll be more powerful. And then you move it down to 8 people instead of 8 million people, you have 8 people, and it's just as powerful. And then you collapse that even into, okay, well, how many trillion cells do we have in our body? How many, I think we think something like 60,000 thoughts a day. A lot of them, most of the majority of them are subconscious, right? And it's like, imagine the power of 8 even within us, right? So it's a beautiful way to kind of bridge the gap between this sense that it's all out there somewhere and it's something we have to get, as opposed to something we tune into and tap into in ourselves and share, and sort of send it through the interconnected network from within, and that ripples out, right? So I like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I do too. And you mentioned something that reminded me. I think it's a good point. You talked about uh, mentioned the 0 point field, which is in the book, and that there's an underlying quantum energy field. And she worked with prestigious scientists across the world who had uncovered this scientifically as well, that the body is not chemical reaction, but quantum frequency and subatomic energy charge.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. She pointed that out as well.
And yeah, I love that you mentioned that, Jennifer, because I feel like this is something that I know myself, even if I think I'm aware of it, I know I'm aware of it, reading books like these just really nourishes my soul. It's that I feel like, because we're like, we're multidimensional. We have mind, body, spirit. We live in different dimensions, not, speaking quantum, right? There's different experiences that we have depending on where we place our focus. And then we also have the ego self too. And it's not about getting rid of any of it. It's just, where are we showing up from, right? And so the this whole idea that uh, we are so much more than, again, like I said before, than we think we are, and just this. Uh, I had an idea that's starting to fly out of my brain right now, to be honest, because something sparked and now it's disappearing. It'll come back in a moment, but um, it was just this, the quantum piece, I think, because the idea that, I guess, where I'm sort of stumbling over my words right now, because the idea pinged and then it was gone just as quickly.
Well, something that was coming to mind whenever you were talking was the 0 point field, and that we are multidimensional. So when we think about the 0 point field, because I think about this quite often, is I think the key to that, and to really take advantage of really, is really being present, being in the now. I feel like we draw all of our energy to a single point, and that's what really helps with giving us that power to really be connected with source. And that's why we can do the energy healing.
Mhm.
That's why we can use that whenever we are, we talk about being in our, uh, that divine connection is the same thing to me. And that's where we can also really utilize our thought energy manifest all the good that we want. She had mentioned in here too that she recorded hundreds, if not thousands, of instantaneous miracles in participants' lives. And these miracles were anywhere from healing long-standing serious health conditions, mending estranged relationships, or they discovered a renewed life purpose or cast off workaday jobs in favor of careers that were more adventurous or fulfilling. And I've experienced that myself. Whenever you come across the information and things start to happen, and then, suddenly how you used to live your life and all the rules that applied at that time and what we thought was true, suddenly everything changes and it no longer applies, which causes you to have different shifts in your life.
Very much so. It's almost like, taking off layers of a heavy coat, like, just all the layers of stuff that's getting in the way, and I've experienced that in my own life too, where I feel I always go back to A Course in Miracles, right? A miracle is just a shift in perception, and before I had read that quote, I actually to me, a miracle in my own ego mind was like, "Oh my goodness, this is, like, something otherworldly. This is not like, this is too, too big or too, I don't know, too, too grand a vision." And then when I remember I read that quote, this was like 20 years ago, I thought, "Oh, it's just a shift in perception." So what you're talking about there is that as we sort of peel off those layers, it's one of the beauties of miracles and those instantaneous healings is that it's almost like a letting go of a letting drop, a dissolution of all that was kind of creating the interference, and it's just like gone. And I feel like that capacity, like you said, to be present is that ability to just be that neutral channel, where all possibilities, infinite possibilities exist, and be open to it. And again, working with that clear intention, and then just creating this inner spaciousness for the possibilities. And there's something really nice about that because it's like that's where, we realize that we don't have to do it, like, little me doesn't have to do it myself alone. It's like the power of the intention. I feel like this is one of the grander things she was trying to really, share, and is this idea that because we're interconnected and because our intentions and our thoughts are powerful, when we connect with that unified field and stay open, that's what makes everything possible. That's how we step out of the struggle and into joy and peace and love and expansion, and that's the creative juiciness of what we're here to discover, that we have this capacity. It's not doesn't matter how old or young we are, what we believe in terms of, like, what religion we belong to or what faith or whatever. And I feel like this is, I don't know, I feel like this is something that's really restorative right now for the soul of humanity, is there's so much trying to pull at our faith and pull at our divine connection, um, in terms of noise inside of us and outside of us. And this book is, just I think that's what I wanted to say earlier when I was talking about the ego mind, because the ego mind can so easily pull us into fear. It's a really, I call it the bodyguard. It's a really good bouncer, like, it's just doing its job, and sometimes you just need to give it a day off or something, or a few minutes off, a coffee break, and
Mhm.
because it's just the book, it is reassuring, to the bouncer in her mind that no, there's actual scientific evidence. The other aspects, at least of myself, I'll speak for myself, but like that resonates, that pings for me. I know this deeply because it's truth. And then there's this is kind of like a cookie for my ego mind to say, okay, go have a snack break, and don't worry, it's safe here. It's all is good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as we move through the book, there is information about a lot of different. There's always an underlying theme amongst everybody's different faiths, whatever they believe in. But I always tell people you have to believe in two things. You have to believe in yourself, that you are this divine creator, that you are able to do this, that you have the power within. And you have to believe in a higher divine power, whatever that is for you, but that higher divine power. I feel like those are the two faiths that you have to have.
I couldn't agree more. And that's something my whole life I've been trying to find a way to articulate, is that I really deep down and passionate about this. I believe that we're, divine co-creators, and I think we're actually really darn good at it. We just don't want to take credit for it, because some of the things we're creating are not things that we think we really want, right? So it's about becoming conscious of actually, it's funny, actually, this just popped into my mind as you were sharing, that we actually, as you said, we're both saying everyone is a divine co-creator. But do we really want to acknowledge that? Because sometimes there's that disconnect between what's out picturing in our lives and what we say we want. And so the the beauty of it is these, what I feel like this book is kind of offering, like an approach in terms of these Power of Eight groups, is to gather. And I know you've experienced this. I've experienced this too, where when you're in a group and you gather with people and you are, gathering with the same uh, purpose, then it amplifies everyone else's intention, and it's just very powerful. And so any of the, other noise, kind of like, it's that law of entrainment, right? Where the highest vibrating frequency kind of pulls up and entrains the other frequencies, and you don't even have to effort to do it. It just happens naturally. Like, you rise, even as a classroom teacher, I know this. Like, if I hold a high expectation for my students, you know, then and I scaffold and I give them the supports along the way to get there, then they rise to that expectation, and the converse is also possible too. So I feel like, yeah, it's really interesting, the work she's doing in this book. Has got so it's got so much in it. It's a lot to, like, it's juicy, it's good, it's inspiring, and I just love it. I couldn't put
Yeah,
it down, like,
I
after you suggested it to me.
I've enjoyed it too because I think it's a great way to she's trying to bridge intellectually how explain it from an intellectual standpoint, and sometimes we have to get it from that standpoint before we can move further. Um, but for me, I was just like I started just believing and things started happening. But I mean there was a little bit of learning with that too, with the mindset, and I believe that we were when I first started this work, that we have such a great potential. And but this is a different way of laying it out and with scientific studies. So um, I like that because I think some people need to understand a little bit of the intellectual part before they, you know, can really be big believers. It's easier for us because we believed and then we see it. So now I expect miracles every day because that's what happens.
It's so true, and it's interesting too, because herself as a scientist, she even talks about how, in the opening of her prologue, she talks about how skeptical she was, and how, you know, she, as a reputable scientist, with scientific rigor and all of her experiments, she didn't want to she was very cautious to kind of be perceived as someone who was, kind of fluffy bunny, or too woo.
Yeah. Yes. Very much. So, we've already been on here for like 25 minutes. So,
Wow. But you know what? Before we close, Jennifer, I'm just curious, because you were talking about manifesting sort of magic and miracles, and I just feel like this is something I want to ask you, because I know you. I've known you for a while now, and like, since you've been reading this book, and I know even before this book, I mean, you've got a lot of years of experience with, working with people, and supporting people with, undoing subconscious beliefs. But what kind of things have you noticed as a result of, this way of being in the world? When you talk about miracles being as natural as breathing every day, because I've got something I want to share too, but I want to ask you first.
What do I notice? Well, I'm in the healing room quite a bit. So there's lots of what people would call miracles in there on how the energy healing can really uplift people. Um, but I had a mentor that I worked with on mindset and in spirituality as well. It all dovetails together. And he said there's no such thing as miracles and magic because that's just who we are. And
Mhm.
I love that
Yeah.
because when you first start getting into this work and you believe and things start happening, it feels so magical. And I still like that term, but then you realize, wow, this is what we all can do. You just have to believe. Ask, believe, receive. It happens.
Yeah. It's so true. And, it's a fun thing to play with too, like, to when you start to become more consciously aware of it, and you read books like this book, and you feel inspired, and you feel reassured by, your intellectual mind feels reassured by, "Oh my goodness, this is somehow makes it seem more real," to that aspect of ourselves. The Like, one of the things I know, I've been sharing a lot about it in various places where I share that, like, last year I was in a car accident on Valentine's Day, and I was rear-ended by a distracted driver, and, overall, I was fine, but I was shaken up from it, right? And one of the things I started really consciously playing with in the car was, because I knew I wanted to keep driving, I needed to drive, and it was literally saying a clear intention and affirmation every time I got into the car. While I was driving, I would just listen to my intuition if there was a moment, and on a very specific level, some people are in a hurry on the road, and if someone started driving too close behind me, I would set in a very loving and firm, powerful intention, a declaration, I guess you would maybe call it, and about, basically revoking any consent to timelines I didn't wanna be on, and commanding the light to be on the highest possible timeline. And what started happening, and it's kind of funny, is because I was experiencing anxiety at the time, that simple practice of intention and commanding the light, I noticed that cars would suddenly change lanes, you know? I noticed, and then I noticed inside of myself as a result of this practice, it became more fun than scary. Like, the anxiety went down, and I was like, then I started reframing the whole experience of what I went through as being a gift rather than a negative thing, right? Because
Mm.
in the beginning, when you go into fight and flight and your nervous system is triggered and you're, shaken up, it takes a bit of a workaround to come back again, but that really helped a lot. And so there's so many practical applications in our everyday lives for harnessing this awareness, right? For just improving the quality of our lives, and being able to navigate the plot twists and curveballs without being totally freaked out by them, you know,
Mhm.
and able just to, like, move with more ease and grace, and even reframe what we may have once seen. That's what you were mentioning before about, shifts. At first, they might have felt like challenges because we're trying to go it alone, as because we've lost that connection to the truth of ourselves as divine co-creators. And when we reconnect with that, then it just life starts to flow more, and it gets easier, and it's also more kind of divinely empowering too, because it gets more juicy good and exciting, and peaceful at the same time. It's not just about, excitement, but it's also that kind of tempered excitement where it's like, "I've got this," this is gonna be an interesting ride, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I loved your story about the highway and your intentions. And I mean, just paying attention to what's happening just around your vicinity is like there's evidence all around us that we are creating our reality. And it's examples like you gave. It's examples, you know, how much traffic is on the road, how much we are that powerful that we can create our reality in that way. And at first, that was a little hard for me to understand. But then the more you put these beliefs into practice and start paying attention, then I was really noticing a lot of things like that. And we are creating everything, you know, every single thing. And once we take responsibility for that, um, then life becomes it can become really fun.
So true. You know, the one last point I wanted to make, it just popped into my head. I just got to toss this in here. It's our inner environment, right? Like it's caring for our inner environment. And that really, I was reminded of that this morning when I was at a staff meeting and we had a presentation about universal design for learning for the students that we serve that are on different learning spectrums and have heightened sensitivities and maybe are sensitive to sound or to just how important the learning environment is. Something as simple as my turning off the lighting, I've noticed with students, like the overhead lighting, because I'm a bit of a bat myself. I don't like artificial lighting. And so just turning the lighting down creates totally shifts the classroom dynamic and totally shifts the way the students feel, and even just acknowledging it makes them feel safer and calmer. And it's really fascinating. Like, I think as we start to become conscious of how we nourish and sustain and care for our inner environment, then our outer environment starts to shift too, because it's being mirrored back to us, like you were just saying. So it's powerful stuff.
Very powerful, very powerful. I am looking forward to continuing this, and we will be back next week, right? We're going to start part 1, which is called Explaining a Miracle. So chapter 1, which is the space of possibilities.
I love
Right.
the
Well,
name
thank you
of
so
that.
much, Pollyanna.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It was
so
wonderful
much,
to share this conversation.
Yes, very
Okay.
good. Bye-bye. Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening.
Honored to be here. You too.